Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Marina Stresnevsky, the president of the Foggy Bottom Association, and I want to welcome everyone to this meeting where we're going to discuss the proposal by the George Washington University Hospital to build a helipad on the southwest corner of the hospital. I'm going to give you a little idea of how the evening will run. First thing I want to say is that not only are we talking to people here in this room, but we're live streaming. So there are people at home, we hope, watching online. We will be taking questions from them if there are any as well. But just remember that everything is being recorded. So, how do I? Okay. Okay. Okay, while we adjust the, now I don't talk at all. This is the first time we've live streamed anything, so we're still testing, and I really appreciate everyone's patience. Okay, the first thing I'm going to introduce Christine Seawright, who is the director of marketing for the hospital, and after she speaks, we are going to hear from Dr. Babak Sarani and from Mike Conklin, thank you, who is an aviation expert. That whole bit should take maybe 10, 12 minutes. And after that, we're going to open it up to questions. I will be calling on people for questions, and I would ask that you please wait until I bring the microphone to you so that the people on the other end of the live stream can hear. Okay? We all good? So, thank you, really. Thank you very much for being here. I know this is a big issue with a lot of strong feelings on a variety of sides, and even more than two. So I'm really glad everybody is here. Christine.
What's up? Okay. Well, thank you. I just also want to reiterate how glad we are that you're able to attend tonight. Thank you very much for coming. We do want to talk tonight about the having a helipad at the hospital. Obviously, for us, it would serve the most critically ill. We can bring them into the hospital much faster. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about the current process for bringing critically ill patients to the hospital. We're also going to talk about the need, really how many people we would be bringing over to the hospital. Obviously we want to minimize the impact on the community as much as possible. So we really want to talk through that plan and some of the things that we would like to do to really minimize that impact. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. And we'll take it from there. So I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Bob Sarani. He's the head of trauma at GWU Hospital. And then Mike Conklin, who is the aviation expert. But he is also he's a former Marine One pilot and he was Marine One pilot for President Clinton. So a great resource for helicopters and any questions regarding that.
So, wow, it's kind of terrifying, actually. All right, so my name is Bob Sarani. Thank you, first and foremost, for taking your to come out and hear me speak. I really do sincerely appreciate your time, and I value your time, so thank you. I am the chief of trauma surgery at George Washington. I've actually been a GW product for a while. I first came to D.C. in 1993. I lived just off the road in the Hamilton House off of New Hampshire Avenue between Foggy Bottom, Washington Circle, and DuPont Circle. That's where I was a student. I kind of went to medical school. So I was in D.C. from about 1993 until 2004 as I did my medical education at George Washington, and then I did my training to become a general surgeon at George Washington. I grew up in the old hospital. I moved across the street to the new hospital. Then I left GW and did my subspecialty training in trauma surgery at the University of Pittsburgh. This is going to become relevant in a second. Bear with me. After I left Pittsburgh, which is a very, very big, it's one of the biggest hospital complexes in the country, I went over to the University of Pennsylvania, where I was an assistant professor of surgery at the University of Pennsylvania for about 6.5, 7 years. I back to GW in November of 2011 to take over as the chief of the Division of Trauma Surgery. And the reason I bring that up is one of the things that struck me when I came back to GW, and I started to kind of put together reorganize the trauma infrastructure at George Washington, and I started to liaison with the medical directors, trauma directors at, say, Howard University Hospital, as well as Washington Hospital Center, which are the other adult trauma centers in the district. Children's, of course, is a trauma center, but they're peds only. One of the things that became readily evident, like immediately evident, was the lack of any ability in the district as a whole to deal with a terrorist event. And remember, I was here in 2001. I remember the airplane exploding in the Pentagon because I heard it from my own apartment. And when I came back in 2011, I'm sorry, it was shocking to me that there's only one hospital, to this day this is true, there's only one hospital in the entire D.C. region that is both a trauma center and has a helipad, and that's the Washington Hospital Center. They have 2 helipads, so they can take 2 helicopters at a time. And if you were to talk to my counterpart of the hospital center, really good guy named Dr. Jack Sava, he would tell you that if they take about 6 critically ill patients at once, that would strain their system, and I would echo that at George Washington as well. You can only throw so many severely injured persons at one hospital before you overwhelm that hospital's capacity. No other hospital in the District of Columbia can take helicopter traffic. None. That is a trauma center and has an operating room on standby. The other hospitals that have a helipad do not have 24/7 operating room capability. They do not have 24/7 interventional radiology capability. They do not have 24/7 stroke care capability, cardiac cath capability. Each hospital has various things it can do, but there are only 2 hospitals in the district that really provide 2017 level United States of America type care, and those are the Washington Hospital Center and George Washington. George Washington is a level 1 verified trauma center. It is a comprehensive stroke center and can provide any and all types of care a critically ill patient needs, regardless of what's happening to that human. The only other places that a helicopter could go, God forbid something bad happens, is Inova Fairfax, going all the way there, or leave us and go to Baltimore. That's it. So what prompted me to kind of start down this road was all about surge capacity. What do we do if there's a surge and there's a need to transport critically injured patients in big numbers? I'm telling you right now, we are not prepared. As we started down this road, one of the things that happened is other hospitals started calling us and saying, and in fact, it just happened literally 20 minutes ago. I got a call from another hospital in the district saying, we got a patient with a massive stroke. We need to refer over to you because we're not a stroke center. And that person's being mobilized right now. We started getting calls from all other hospitals. United Medical Center, which formerly was called Greater Southeast when I was a kid and here. I spent many a night moonlighting there. The persons who live in that region are wonderful people, but unfortunately, that hospital does not have the same capabilities as an academic quaternary care facility. And they get a lot of sick patients there. They get a lot of friend drop-off following gunshot wounding every Friday, Saturday night. That is a given. They get a lot of heart attack because the patients who live in that area tend to suffer from a lot of medical problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, and they don't have a cardiac cath lab. So they started calling us and saying, we've got to send patients to you. And these patients are severely sick to the point where we can no longer put them in an ambulance. They've exceeded paramedic scope of practice. They need a nurse. Well, that's a problem when there are no nurses in ambulances. We started getting calls from other hospitals saying, we need to transport massive heart attack to you. We had a patient who is a wonderful human. He's very much alive and a friend of mine now, whose wife is a retired nurse. He had a cardiac arrest at his house, fell down the stairs. Luckily, his wife saw it happen and started CPR right away. We took him to an outside hospital, did a cardiac cath on him. They opened up the blood vessel in his heart that was blocked and started the heart again. That hospital 100% saved his life. The problem is he needed a specialized device called ECMO, which is basically cardiac bypass, for 2 weeks. And they don't have ECMO capability. So we airlifted him to George Washington. And we can talk a little bit about how we get those patients here. He survived the discharge. So we've been transporting, that's actually a good segue. We've been transporting about 115 patients per year by helicopter already. We've been doing that for the last couple of years. The number's been about 100, 115. And what they do right now is they land at an off-site heliport, which the owner and operator is sitting right there. He can maybe answer some questions that are more technical than my feeble brain can answer. But those patients have been coming over to us because they have no place else to go. When the outside hospital calls and says, this person needs emergency rescue, how can you say no? And so those patients come to us. They land at the South Street Heliport, which is near the National Stadium. They then rendezvous with an ambulance that brings them up to us, which works well, except it doesn't work if you are bleeding to death, too much time. Doesn't work if you're having a massive heart attack, where the blood vessel needs to be opened up within 90 minutes. That's the national standard, so-called door-to-balloon time. Doesn't work if you're having a massive stroke, as this one individual is somewhere else in the city right now, where, as the neurologist will tell you, time is brain. And by the time you airlift to go to an off-site helipad to rendezvous with an ambulance to then come up traffic down Independence Avenue or however which way you want to get to us. So there's a need here, guys. There's a need from a surge capacity perspective. That's our own safety. There's a need from love thy neighbor perspective. Those who live in an area that doesn't have the same degree of health care that you and I have access to. And one last thing I'll mention, then I'll kind of stop talking and maybe Mike can fill in some more information for you all. I'd much rather have a question and answer than a monologue. Is I know everyone's concerned about noise pollution, and I would be too. Like, that is the most natural concern anybody should have, is the sound of the helicopter. I'll tell you, as Mike can explain better than I, that, and I guarantee you this, that a helicopter makes less noise than an ambulance. And right now, the program that we have is resulting in 112 or so ambulance runs up 23rd Street, up New Hampshire, however which way they're going to get here, per year. If anything, and I guarantee you this, as surely as I will tell you I'm an MD, if anything, the helicopter program will decrease the noise pollution around Foggy Bottom. It will not increase it. And I can prove that to you with fact. So that's kind of my opening comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm really looking forward to a very nice conversation with everybody. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Conklin. I happen to be a retired lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. I was talking to Christine this afternoon about the trips that I used to take across the Key Bridge to Dixie Liquor, that because it was 18 in 1974 when I graduated from high school. After high school, I went to the Naval Academy and then served in the Marine Corps for 21 years. I've done medevac flights as an active duty Marine in support of the local community before they had EMS programs like the Stat Medevac or PHI and the companies that support the GWU Hospital today. I've done medevacs in the combat situations as a active duty Marines. And probably most importantly, the lady that's put up with me for 38 years was a passenger on an EMS flight in Roanoke, Virginia, that got her to a higher level of care that she needed at the time. And it's remarkable the recovery that she's made. So I've been involved in community meetings, and I remember going to a similar situation, and it was just for helicopter noise, in Alexandria in 1998 when I was flying Marine One. And I happened to grow up in Alexandria, Virginia, went to Blessed Sacrament Grade School over there for 4th grade. And the people in the neighborhood were very concerned about the noise. Let's face facts. You folks live within 2 miles, as the crow flies, of National Airport. The noise that's created from the 737s and the 757s and the aircraft that come down to Potomac or take off going out to Potomac to Cabin John, depending on which way the traffic is landing, are louder than the helicopters. They're going to come to George Washington's helicopter pad. Let me kind of take you through the process that will happen. The helicopter will come in. The EC-135 and the EC-145. The EC-145 was previously known as the BK-117, but there's been some consolidation in the equipment manufacturers, and they're all under the Eurocopter Airbus umbrella right now, are two of the quietest helicopters that exist. They're under 85 decibels. So EC-135 comes in and lands. They have to wait for 30 seconds for the engines to cool down because of a phenomenon known as metal fatigue, and then they'll start their shutdown in less than 30 seconds, so a total of 1 minute after they land, that helicopter will be quiet. So you might hear the helicopter for 45 seconds to a minute max as it comes in. You're talking about 2 minutes worth of noise to save somebody's life 116 times a year last year. The paramedic and the flight nurse then accompany the patient downstairs. The pilot stays with the aircraft on the helicopter pad. Approximately 20 to 30 minutes later, after the patient's care and custody has been transferred to the hospital, the paramedic and the flight nurse will return to the helicopter with their equipment, and it takes about 90 minutes for the helicopter, excuse me, not 90 seconds, not 90 minutes, 90 seconds for the helicopter to spool up, all the systems to be operational, and within 30 seconds they'll be gone. You're talking about less than 5 minutes total noise to save somebody's life. More than happy to answer any questions.
I'll just throw one last thing out there, and then I too would like to just to open this up to conversation. So I looked up the publicly reportable diversion hours for the various hospitals in the region, and specifically I looked up the Washington Hospital Center, because as I said, the way things have kind of evolved is that has become the disaster facility for the entire region, and that's fine. I mean, I think Dr. Sav and his team are fine. I'm not here to tell you we're better than they are. I'm not saying that in any sense of the word. But if you were to look up Washington Hospital Center's diversion hours on the Maryland Emergency Medical Systems website, the so-called MEMS website, Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Systems Services, Washington Hospital Center had 8,311 hours of diversion in calendar year 2015. 8,300 hours. That hospital was full and could not accept anybody. Of that 8,000, it breaks out essentially 50-50. About 4,400 hours they were open, they were close to yellow traffic, and I'll explain what that is in a second. More importantly, for 4,000, 3,900 if you want to be exact, they were close to red traffic. Red traffic means there is no EKG or heart monitor left in the hospital. They have used up every single cardiac monitor they have. They can take nobody who's in any shape or form sick. Yellow means that they can take people who need cardiac monitoring, but they cannot take anybody else. So in other words, they've triaged to the sickest of the sick. If you're anything less sick than the sickest of the sick, what they would call a priority 2, priority 3, you're not going to the hospital center. So that really, I think, brings it on home, is if this is what everyday business looks like, can you imagine what would happen if there's a disaster? People are going to die, or they're going to be airlifted to Baltimore, Richmond, and over Fairfax, assuming that's not in the disaster zone itself. In other words, our disaster plan right now is get out, as opposed to stay with your own community where you can be next to your loved one or whatever and stay. And so that is where this whole conversation, I think, starts. And with that, I'm kind of happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Sarah had her hand up first. I'm going to call on people in the order they raise their hands, and every so often if we get a question from the live stream, which we may or may not, I will go ahead and answer. So Sarah's first. Sorry.
Where does Suburban Hospital fit into this? Because they have helicopter service, and also they're building another hospital, which I assume will also have a helicopter pad on it. But I know Suburban has helicopter service.
Yes, Suburban is a level 2 trauma center. It's a good trauma center, to say the least. I know the director of trauma there very well, a guy named Danny Westerband. They're a level 2 trauma center. They, in turn, transfer all of their patients who need level 1 need, generally speaking, up to Baltimore Shock Trauma, but sometimes they'll send them up to Johns Hopkins. They have a corporate affiliation with Johns Hopkins. They're a fairly small hospital as far as overall bed capacity is involved. I have not looked up their diversion hours, which would also be on the MEMS website since they're part of the Maryland system, to know truly how stressed are they during daily operations. But there's certainly a good hospital, a good trauma center. They're not in the District of Columbia.
But they wouldn't be in the circle in case of a disaster to be of help to the District of Columbia.
That you're crossing state lines. So the way the trauma disaster plan works, which I helped co-write as the chief of trauma for George Washington, along with the Department of Health, the trauma mass casualty plan for the District of Columbia basically states that the district, anything that happens within the district will be they're going to try to keep it within the district as much as they can. There, of course, are opportunities to ask for mutual assistance from either the Virginia side or the Maryland side. But crossing state lines, as you can imagine, is not terribly easy from a just a kind of a logistics perspective when you talk about disaster planning. So they're in the disaster plan as a backup, but that's because that's true of the entire state of Maryland, not just suburban. We would prefer to have the infrastructure to take care of our own internal problems internally.
Okay, as having done Marine One, where does the president fit into this picture?
As far as where does he go?
If there's a disaster, who's responsible for the president?
Well, that's actually a confidential thing that I'm not clear to. I signed paperwork that said I wouldn't talk about stuff like that.
We all vote, so never mind.
No, I understand.
No, when he got shot, a limo took him to GW. I mean, this is a reasonable question. Because it has an impact on our neighborhood.
I do not know of any time that in the history of Marine One that the president has been transported because of a gunshot or anything like that. It has not happened to date. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. It doesn't mean that there's not plans for it.
Hold up, because we're trying to do this in order, so.
Thanks. Steve Jornovich. I think it was an impressive, convincing presentation. I have a couple questions I wanted to ask you, because I participated in the debate back in November at the ANC meeting, which unfortunately voted against helicopters. And there were a couple things said in that debate that you didn't address today, and I wonder if you could. One was the idea that the helicopter was unsafe landing on top of the hospital. And I wonder if you could address to what extent when the hospital was built, provision was made for a safe helipad on it. Second, people said at that meeting that this was a no-fly zone, and I gather there is a no-fly zone on the other side of 23rd Street, but I'm wondering to what extent the no-fly zone would affect emergency helicopter, but second, how does that affect the path the helicopter would take to the hospital from different parts of the city? And then third, this very nice chart that you have here from Union Memorial Hospital on noise comparisons notes the ambulance siren at a much higher noise than the helicopter. But we have something at Foggy Bottom where I live and work. We have something in Foggy Bottom they don't have as much of, I suspect, in Baltimore, which is that we have motorcades going through Washington Circle with dogs of the president or whoever is on these motorcades. But they come quite frequently.
Yeah, they do.
And do you have any ideas as to what extent the noise from the motorcade, how that compares to the noise of the single ambulance siren?
I don't know if you're right, because that motorcade goes right past the 2150 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the physician's office buildings, as many of you guys may know. Holy cow, that's loud. Even 7 stories up, my office on the 7th floor, was on the 7th floor. With the window closed, it is incredibly loud, the sirens. I don't know how a police siren compares to an ambulance siren. I really don't know the answer to that question. It's pretty loud. I will tell you that, I guess it's not up there, but it's in your packet. The helicopter is much softer than the ambulance siren. We were up on the roof today, and an ambulance came rolling by. And you can hear it. It's 7 stories up on a somewhat windy day, next to an air conditioning unit of the hospital, like on the outside on the rooftop. I still heard that ambulance as if I swear it was next door to me. So that's why I say to you with such confidence that if we could drop 112 or 115 ambulances per year? Because the patients are being flown here anyway. They're just generating more noise because of the ambulance that has to accompany the person up. I feel very comfortable telling you that the aeromedical program, if anything, will lower the noise pollution. I hear you. I will let Mike discuss the safety issues because he's the pilot and I'm not. I will tell you, for whatever it's worth, when I was a resident and they were planning and then subsequently built the new hospital, I was here. Everybody I talked to about, oh my goodness, now we're building a new hospital, are we going to have a helipad, said no way. So I do not think that the old administration, this is not some sleight of hand trick, that, oh yeah, they built the hospital to withstand the weight, and then they waited, 10 years to spring it on the Foggy Bottom community. I really don't think that the aeromedical program was something they envisioned. I frankly think, to be honest with you, we're somewhat lucky that the way the building was designed, it can withstand the weight of a standard aeromedical helicopter. I'll tell you today, the building cannot withstand the weight of anything other than a standard, like an EC-135, EC-145. It will not take Coast Guard type helicopters. No, it'll crush. It certainly will not take Marine One. That would destroy everybody in the region. So I think the way the building was built, I think we got lucky that it can take a helipad. Otherwise, there was no secret plan to do this.
The 7480, which is an FAA document that is the first step to get FAA approval for a helipad, heliport, lists the largest aircraft that this facility will be able to handle is the S-76. That has a max gross weight of 11,700 pounds. Marine One, as it exists today, is 23,000 pounds. That's the H3. The H60 is 22,000 pounds. So you're talking about basically almost half the size. And the new Marine One, the S-92, is going to be 28,000 pounds. So Marine One will never be allowed to land. You had referred to a question about the restricted area. Okay, it's P56A, which encompasses the South Lawn, the Capitol, the mall area, and all of that. Basically, if you start at the southwest corner of the Lincoln Memorial, that property, and you go to Rock Creek Parkway, and then you come up to where New Hampshire and K Street intersect, and then you go east, that is the P56. So because of the P56 restricted area, the approaches come from the Potomac. I believe it's 315 and 090 were the two headings. You got to have two approaches to be a heliport. You have to have two approaches that are 90 degrees apart. We went up on the roof today. I was just brought on board a couple of days ago, and I'm pleased to say that there's no serious obstacles that the helicopters have to be concerned about. There's no power lines because it's an elevated pad. And then the other thing that I was able to do when Doc sent me the list of all of the transfers that you've had via helicopter, all but one of the 116 transfers were in an EC-135 or an EC-145, dual engine helicopters. So from a safety margin, you've got a great program working here right now.
Can you answer the question on the route?
As far as the route?
Gentleman's question on the route. You said there had to be two routes.
Basically,
And where would the other come?
it would basically come over the Kennedy Center.
We're taking questions in turn. Okay. So this gentleman's been waiting.
Thank you. I'm an old economics professor used to comparing costs and benefits. This is definitely a case where that's what matters. And it's not just the peak at which some vast amount of trouble may come up. It's every day when there would be these helicopters. You haven't talked about that. The most obvious question is, what frequency do you predict for this?
Yeah.
And can you persuade us that these aren't low estimates designed to lull us into acceptance? And are they during the day? Are they during the night? The decibel question is extremely controversial, as you know. I can't learn anything from that. You have to tell me how close the measuring device is, what kind of surrounding echo conditions there are. I hear all the ambulances every day. I live right across the circle. They're not that loud. I've heard helicopters way, way louder. Now, if you tell us, though, that you'll always have small helicopters with a minimum of equipment, a minimum of people riding in it, maybe that would help persuade us. But we've all heard dreadfully loud helicopters. And if that was involved here, that really would not be acceptable.
First of all, let's kind of go through a process. And I may ask you to repeat some of the, keep the microphone with them if you don't mind, so we make sure we cover things. The loud helicopters, I mean, the H3, the H60, the noise comparison between that and the EMS helicopters is night and day.
I don't know what letters or
The
numbers
park
they're
police.
talking
The
about.
H3 that is the primary aircraft that they fly the president in.
That has nothing to do with this. We've
Sure,
all
sure,
seen
sure,
that
sure.
and heard it.
No,
Tell
sure,
us
sure.
about the helicopters that might actually be used.
No, sir, I strongly disagree with you because the helicopter noise that you're hearing, okay, there's helicopter routes that go through all major cities in the United States. There's helicopter routes. If I was flying up from Quantico and wanted to go to Cabin John, I would check in with National Airport and say, this is Nighthawk whoever. I'm going to take a Route 4, which crosses the Wilson Bridge at 300 feet. I fly up past National Airport, and I take a left. When I get by Memorial Bridge, fly over the Key Bridge, Chain Bridge, out to Cabin John. Those are the helicopters that you're hearing.
I see noisy helicopters. They look small. They're very loud.
Let me, if I can expand on that. The
This is a complicated matter
helicopters.
that you're giving us a quick.
Can we please allow people to answer, allow the gentleman to answer the questions? This is for a discussion and that kind of thing, not for an argument.
The helicopters that we're hearing most often, the ones that fly around the district, are the park police. You see them flying all the time. The park police helicopter is gigantic. It sounds like, it frankly looks like some helicopter from the Vietnam era, doesn't it? Like you watch Apocalypse Now, that's what they're
The
flying.
412.
And
It's a 412. It's one of the noisier helicopters that exists.
that is not what aeromedical flies. So the EC-135, EC-145, which are the ones that are actually flying, like, as Mike said, of the 116, 115 were in one of those two aircraft. They are dramatically less noisy. So you can't compare the two. The park police primary mission is law enforcement, not aeromedical transport. So it's a kind of a whole different animal, and I have no say in what the police officers do. I will answer your other question is regarding volume. So, 116, if you think about it, since you're the economics professor, and I appreciate the question, 116 flights, let's make the number easy for ourselves, 120 flights divided by 365 days per year is about one flight every 3 days. That's about what we're averaging, is about 2 a week. Of the current statistics that I can tell you are true before we get into projections, of those flights, about 75 to 80% are done during business hours or early evening. We take very few transfers, very, very few transfers at 2 or 3 in the morning. And you know why? Because we don't take scene flights, right? There's no highways around here for people to crash into. The highways go to Suburban, Fairfax, etc. The patients who are coming to George Washington outside of a disaster are coming hospital-to-hospital transfers. And so the hospital-to-hospital transfers tend to occur during mostly business hours and evening hours because that's when the doctors are working in the other hospitals. At 2 in the morning, all the other doctors are home too, and they're not going to initiate a transfer. So you're looking at about currently 1 flight every 3 days, 2 flights a week on average, most of which will occur between about literally 9 a.m., 10 a.m. to about 9 p.m. in that time frame. Even if we were to double the volume, since you're economics, let's just say my business booms and we just double the volume. First of all, George Washington doesn't have the bed capacity. We would start seeing diversion hours. Secondly, you'd be looking at 4 flights a month, 4 flights a week. We'd go from 2 a week to 4 a week. That's it. I do not, I swear to you, anticipate multiple flights a day, 7 days a week. It's a 384-bed hospital. Where are you going to put them? It's not a 1,000-bed monstrosity. so the emergency department sees 75,000 patients a year. That is an actual number of George Washington's emergency department. 75,000 patients are seen in GW's ER per year, 2,000 of whom are trauma activations. Those are hard, cold numbers. But if anything, this is going to decrease that ambulance traffic, which I'm telling you right now is louder than a helicopter. I will prove that to you, but it is true. I'm sorry? By 2 a week or 116, whatever a year, exactly.
Hi, I would have preferred that we began this discussion with what the history is. The DC Council, Ward 2 Council member John Wilson, introduced, when he was before Jack Evans, our council member, a bill that got unanimous council support to not allow any helicopter pad at GW. It's called the Helicopter Landing Pad Nuisance Act. And my question is, if the legislative history is all about you don't do it in a residential neighborhood. So my question is, where are any other helipads in densely residential neighborhoods of high-rises?
You mean in D.C. or?
In the United States.
Oh, I have no idea. I'm sorry.
Are there any? No, we have a densely residential neighborhood that is, as I got emails today from people, that an airplane could have a wind thing and a helicopter could have a wind thing and bump into one of our buildings. That it's dangerous when you high-rises all around.
Well, I mean, for example, Sibley, which is obviously in a residential neighborhood, it doesn't have high-rises, but it's a residential area. Sibley has a helipad. It doesn't have an operating room 24/7, but it has a helipad. I will also mention to you that since that law was written, just a quick little Google search. In 2013, we had the Navy Yard shooting. In 2009, we had the metro derailment. In 9/11, of course, we had the unfortunate 9/11 accident. And then if you look at things that I think as a district we're extremely, extremely prone to, in 2016, there was a mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. There was the mass shooting in Brussels. There was the car hijacking and killing of mass civilians in Nice, France. And there was the police ambush in Dallas, Texas.
I'm aware of all that's not my question. Can you get us the answer to my question, which is any other residential neighborhoods with high-rises?
Sibley Hospital.
Sibley doesn't have high-rises in that neighborhood.
It has
No resident. They're all single-family homes.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Can you get us the answer to that question?
Sure. I mean, I can probably look up New York City, which is like the bastion of high-rises.
Hi, I'm Florence Herman. I'm one of the advisory neighborhood commissioners, and I've been a commissioner for 10 years. I know Kim Russo quite well, and she's been really helpful. But I just want to defend the ANC a little bit, and I want to encourage you, maybe Kim suggested this, and maybe the advice wasn't followed, but part of the concern with the ANC was the way this was initiated, this discussion. It was through going to Yvette Alexander, a lame duck council member, and asking her to propose emergency and legislation, which kind of got people's shackles up, and we were wondering what was going on, and there wasn't a lot of good information. So we're all really reasonable people. We have lawyers, and we have a doctor on the ANC.
Yeah, I heard.
And I'm going to listen to that doctor, and he said be open-minded. And you've answered one of my questions, because my uncle has a condo right near Vanderbilt Medical Center, and it sounds like Vietnam, but it may be that Vanderbilt Medical Center has bigger helicopters coming in, so that may be the reason. So it's been really helpful hearing about the different types of helicopters that would land there, and also hearing about the frequency. And we understand that may change if there is a catastrophic event in D.C. like a 9/11 or some of the other events you've mentioned. But I guess my question is, I feel a little bit better when you discuss the bed capacity. I feel a little bit better when you talk about the type of helicopter that's landing here and the number of landings. Is there, I realize you can never predict the future, but is there any way that you might have some kind of understanding with the community about the amount of usage this would get in normal times? I don't know if there's a way to do that. I think that would go a long way to alleviating concerns. And I also want to say on January 31st, I practically cut off 2 fingers, and I got to go to the GW emergency room. And
I see 10.
They're much better now. But I can attest to the fact that there were not a lot of extra beds there. And this isn't directed to you. This is directed to Richard Livingston. It was a cold evening, and it was just really awful. There were so many homeless people in there. And the compassion of the emergency room doctors and nurses, because I could hear next door to me somebody saying, Mr. So-and-so, this is the 3rd time you've been in here tonight. What has happened now? And that is a lot of what GW is dealing with that Sibley and other hospitals don't. And Richard, I think you need to take that back to your boss.
If I can make a comment, thank you for those comments. I'll give you the first time I ever heard of an EC 135, 145, if you guys haven't figured it out, I'm not a pilot, was when I was working at Penn. So at Penn, which is a whole different hospital system, it's literally gigantic. They do have 1,000 beds. They have a helipad, they have 2 helipads, which are very, very active. They own 6 of their own helicopters. And so the helipad is just constantly in use. They fly EC 135, 145s, which is the first time I've ever even heard that term. The helipad at the University of Pennsylvania is located on top of one of the hospital. Their hospital is made of multiple buildings because they expanded over like centuries, and they connected the buildings by various walkways and hallways. But some of the buildings are taller than the others, and the helipad is built on top of one of the buildings called Silverstein. And it's on the, I think the 11th or 12th floor of whatever the highest floor of Silverstein is. The problem with Silverstein is it's next to another building called the Founders Building, and the Founders Building is taller than Silverstein. So the helicopter has to kind of come in. It's a little bit of a dangerous place because the wind could hit it and knock it over. Mind you, they've never had a single accident. But what struck me was when I was in the patient's rooms on Founders, I'm kind of one of these guys who likes to look at helicopters and airplanes. So like when I'm in the airport, I'm the guy by the window. I would stand there and watch the helicopters come and go, and you could barely hear them, and the patients could sleep. The helicopters would not wake up the patients. I really thought this was the dumbest idea I've ever seen in my life. Who on earth would put a helipad outside of a patient's room? And I'm telling you right now, Penn has not upgraded its windows ever, never mind soundproofing them. So that's my first inclination of what an EC 135, 145 will buy you. Penn would never, not in a million years, allow the park police to land on its helipad. It'd be way too loud. So that's why of all the things I've told you, I hope you get the impression the thing I'm most confident about, other than the fact that this program saves lives, is that it will not disturb your daily activities or your nighttime sleep. That I'm telling you, I will put my MD degree down on that.
You have a commitment from the hospital that they're going to do a noise study. Okay, what we need to do is work as a group, find out where we need to collect the data. It's just not at the helipad. You need to put it on the approach quarters that the helicopters are coming in and going out of, and find out what the effect is. You know, what you do is you put these sensors out there for 72 to 96 hours. You're finding out what the ambient noise is that exists. You're going to know when they shoot a practice approach you could shoot a practice approach into the rooftop today. The helicopter will just come into a hover over the roof. You can find out that the noise during the hovering aspect would be probably the loudest because it's a large power situation. But you've got a commitment from the hospital that they want to find out what the ambient noise is and what the noise that's going to be created by the helicopters is. In my opinion, I'm an outside consultant. I live in Chicago. I grew up in this area, and I spent most of my Marine Corps career in this area. I love Washington, D.C. But you've got a hospital in your community that wants to be a friendly neighbor. They want to be a good neighbor. They want to bring a positive thing to your community. And give them, in my opinion, the opportunity to find out what the noise impact is going to be. Everybody is throwing out different numbers, and there's a lot of other helicopters that operate in this area that are not the aeromedical.
Okay, go ahead.
Could you please describe the procedure that you would have to go through to get approval? Whom has the final decision to make about whether this is approved?
For the helipad, you mean?
And what timeline you're hoping for on those procedures?
There's no current legislation right now, but it would be. So there is no current legislation right now. We really wanted to engage the community and talk to you, understand what your concerns are. It obviously is something that would go through the city council. It would need the mayor's approval. So, but we have not begun that process yet.
Sorry that I missed the first part of your presentation. I'm not sure if you have really addressed our concerns that live around this area. That when the helicopter goes over what building, where is the location of the helipad, and what is the routes? There we need to see a drawing. Apparently, if my building that I live in right around the corner here is not in the path, I'm not that concerned. But if it is going over my head, I'm very much concerned. So do you have a drawing or anything?
I don't have a drawing yet. I mean, we're working on.
Where is the path?
We don't have a drawing yet, but we'll certainly get you guys one. The helipad right now would be situated on the south corner of the building, which is the side of the building, kind of over the metro, on the metro side, not on the Washington Circle side, but on the metro side, a little bit toward the New Hampshire side specifically. So kind of, if you imagine the building's a triangle, that's where the helipad would be. And then, as Mike said, maybe before you were here, the approach one is over the
Kennedy Center?
Yes, which is going to go right above our roof deck, where I live. And it's going all the way through some of the historic little houses, and then it's coming to the hospital. So basically, it's going through New Hampshire. Is that right?
I have to see the drawing. It hasn't been created yet. I mean, we looked at basically an approach that would come just east of Chain Bridge, and then another one that comes over the Kennedy Center, if memory serves me correct.
Yeah, it's on the 23rd Street side of New Hampshire Avenue. It's not going to ride up New Hampshire, and then comes up and then lands. So that's the approach.
Yeah, it's going around a lot of buildings and a lot of people.
But I tell you what, I think when we do the sound study, the best thing we can do, all kidding aside, is put a microphone in your house. Because that's how the sound study is done, right? The way the sound study is done is the company goes and puts a bunch of microphones in your homes. And some microphones will trigger at various decibels. Some microphones are just constantly on. Some windows are open, some windows are closed. So it's trying to get a feel for different conditions. And then some microphones are at ground level, some microphones will be at higher level, like if you're in a high rise or something like that. And that will tell you then what is the sound that you will hear. And then they'll actually fly a helicopter. So then not only are you able to hear it with your own 2 ears, but we can also get a accurate measurement of the sound in terms of the level of exposure, the decibels, and the duration of exposure.
I don't know what that means for us that are living around here. Are you living in a building that
If I can jump in here, my house is 300 feet from where the helipad would be. My bedroom window is 300 feet from where the helipad would be. I've already made arrangements to have a sound study then. If it keeps me up, if I find it disturbing, that's one thing. That's why they're going to test, and they're going to test on your building to see how loud it really is. Does that explain it?
Again, you're talking about less than 5 minutes total noise exposure, including the landing and the takeoff of the helicopter, and it happens twice a week.
there is no guarantee? You say it twice a week, but there's no guarantee of how many times they're coming and going.
All I can tell,
Is there any written paper that you can sign up that nobody promised, even if you promise emergency or if somebody want to come in, they come in?
ma'am, you came in late. And I'm a retired helicopter pilot from the Marine Corps. I've done medevacs as a pilot in support of local communities. I've done them in combat. But most importantly, as I told this crowd, my wife of 38 years was a passenger on an EMS flight. I guarantee you that everybody in this room would want that helicopter if it was one of your loved ones that needed it at that time.
I've done my best to give you guys a projection of the volume. I mean, the 116 is an actual number. That's a real number. But as I said, I can't imagine we will double the number because of our own capacity issues. Even if we were to, though, that's, again, 4 flights per week on average. But I'll tell you today, I have a hard time as a physician giving you what you asked for, which is a guarantee as a number, because if someone calls me and says, Joe's going to die, what would you like me to say? Well, gosh, I got this guarantee that says he has to? I can't do that.
So a lot of people died so far that we didn't have a helicopter.
There is no doubt in my mind, and I can tell you actual names of persons for whom we got a phone call to transport and we couldn't. And yes, I know of persons who have died, if that's what you need. That is true.
Ma'am, you asked for a helicopter in a large city or around high rises. Children's Hospital in Chicago has a hospital pad, and they went through a very long process to get the approval and all of that type of stuff. And it's only for neonatal and things like that. But it's on the 26th or 27th floor in downtown Chicago.
Well, you've sort of taken some of my thunder away, but I've got 3 points I want to make. Number one, I'm with her. My house, our house, is across the street from the loading dock of the hospital. You can put microphones on the roof. You can put them in the kitchen window where the Washington Senator sign is. You know the senators. You can put them in the driveway. Probably our dogs will be louder than the helicopters. But please, put them there, because if anybody's going to be affected, it's going to be us. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the question was about what happens with wind and high buildings and everything. Please, I am under the impression that just simply, for the lack of a more understanding on my part, rules of aviation say if it's not safe to fly, you don't fly, because you just make you not only have a patient that could die, you got a pilot and other people that could die. So you don't make the problem worse.
You'll come up with a specific envelope where the winds have to be for this facility, just like at Children's Hospital. If the winds exceed 27 knots, they're not allowed to fly the patients in.
And the third thing I'll say, I used to work at Georgetown University as an athletic trainer. So I was out on the athletic fields on campus, and there is a helipad there, as you all know, and the helicopters would go by, and there are different helicopters. They're traffic reporter helicopters, news helicopters, they're all sorts of things, and they're different. And we take our dogs to the dog park, and there was a hellaciously loud helicopter there this evening before I came over here. And it was gone in about a minute's time. And my point is, having worked at Georgetown and being outside where I could hear and see the helicopters go to the helipad, they weren't that loud. And I could take out my hearing aids. People could do that, because probably half the people in the room are probably wearing hearing aids. But,
the human body is an amazing machine. My wife and I have 4 children, and our middle daughter went to DePaul University in downtown Chicago, and she lived from where I'm sitting to that back wall to the elevated pink line. And I remember the first time I visited, I said, "You're going to stay here? How are you ever going to sleep?" And you kind of become numb to things after a period of time. No. Look, when I was in the first Gulf War, I lived right next to the runway, and I never thought that I'd get any sleep for the first 2 or 3 days. But you become numb to it. And again, you're talking about saving people's lives here.
I'll mention one last thing to you guys about the safety issues. I'm sorry to cut you off, sir. The way the whole flight thing works, not the mechanics of the flight, but what happens is when a call comes into George Washington, hey, we've got this one patient who's terribly ill, and we're requesting a air flight. What we do is we say, okay, fine. We get all the information. We call a air medical provider. By the way, GW is not going to buy a helicopter, at least until I retire. Who knows when that'll be. So we're not into the purchase your own helicopter business. We call one of the air medical providers. Let's just pick one. Stat Medevac. You've probably seen them flying around. Or MedStar. Doesn't matter. We just call a helicopter provider. And we say, we've got this flight. It's located over here at United Medical Center. Here's the patient. Here's the story. The way that works internally within the helicopter company is the helicopter company dispatcher will pick up the phone and call the pilot, and will tell the pilot, you have to go to this hospital. They will give them no other information at all. They will not tell them you're going to pick up a 5-year-old who's dying. That might bias the pilot to fly when it's unsafe. They won't say you got to pick up a 95-year-old who's dying, because that might bias the pilot to be like, I don't want to. So all the pilot knows is, I need to get from point A to point B. Is it safe, yes or no? That is it. They are totally blinded to the medical circumstances. Once the pilot says we're go, then all the other information is given. You're going to pick up Mrs. Smith. She's a 45-year-old female. Here's the story. I have had plenty of times when I have called. Stat Medevac is the entity we call first, just because we want to, not that we're in any kind of a financial relationship with them. I've had plenty of times when I've called Stat Medevac and the pilot, and I've gotten back from the dispatcher, they'll always say, we'll call you back. Call you back and say, Dr. Serrani, no, pilot said, no, they're refusing flight because of low cloud, because of incoming rain, because of wind, because of who knows what. And I remember once I was driving home, and I was on the GW Parkway heading up toward my house, and I was like, what fog are you talking about? Like, I'm here, and wherever you are, you're not here. So he said to me, look, it is what it is. You know the rules. We're not going to negotiate. Call me tomorrow. I hung up. I called PHI right away. And I said, I've got a flight. And the guy said, hold on. Called me back about 5 minutes later and said, refusing flight. So the pilots are all about safety first and foremost. If one guy says no, even though they're not talking to each other, they all say no. They're all playing off the same rule book. Nobody wants an accident. And so I'm very confident about the safety profile of the mission. The other thing I'll mention to you is we on our side do not launch the aircraft readily. We are very reluctant to call for air transport unless you have specific needs that demand aeromedical. If you're time sensitive, heart attack, stroke, bleeding to death, massive trauma, you're going to come by air. If you need a critical care transport nurse, we have 3 ambulance companies, Lifestar, AMR, Butler, with whom we have a relationship to get a ground unit going anytime before we consider air. We go out of our way not to use air. That's why there's only 116, 2 a week. So please don't think that if we build this helipad, I'm going to start some air traffic control center. I swear to you, that is not the plan for a variety of reasons. Cost, safety, waste of resources, all sorts of reasons. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. You started the evening talking about a terrorist attack as being the case scenario. That's why we need this. And then later I heard that if there were 6 trauma patients coming in at one time, that would saturate your capacity. And then I heard that, there was the shooting at the naval base and all the kinds of terrorist instances, and that's why we need this. And then I heard, we have a bed capacity. We get it in red zones for so many days a year, in yellow zones. Sure. And so we can't really take new patients. So we're going back and forth like this. If the case scenario really is a big terrorist attack, can you defend that, or maybe just set that aside?
So I think I can defend it. I don't want to set it aside because I really am concerned, honestly. In a terrorist event, God forbid one should ever occur, the hospital, all hospitals, us, Hospital Center, Howard, Children's, whatever, we have contingency plans to empty the building quickly to just rapidly discharge patients. When 9/11 occurred, our emergency room, which is essentially always full, was emptied in about 30 minutes. You take patients who are not very sick, and you say to them, there has been a terrorist event. You now need to go. As rude as that is, it is what it is. When President Reagan was shot, the emergency department was emptied, especially when they brought James Brady in right behind him with a gunshot wound to the head. So there are ways that we operate on a daily basis where a hospital is at 90% capacity and whatnot, and we just have to deal with that. And then there's a surge event where we put nicety away and we say, look, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, frankly, you got to get out because there's inbound. Hopefully that will not happen. That's the most I can tell you. Everything I've told you is the truth, and that is the schizophrenic world in which we live, right? The hospital's full, but I can take 1 Z's, 2 Z's. I just can't take 10 Z's.
Hello. I want to thank you for your presentations. I have a question, and I guess I know the answer, but I assume you don't have a video or film of these helicopters that you're talking about that you would use that would show the noise level. And if you don't, could you make such a film available.
Ma'am, when we're doing the noise study, we're going to actually fly the approach paths with the helicopters. So we're going to find out what actually exists during.
I think that would answer a lot of the questions
Yes, ma'am.
and concerns that people have.
Yeah, we'll give it to you live. I completely agree with you.
You know, the doc was talking about what happens in natural disasters and man-made situations. I'm a veteran of the Beirut bombing. I was physically there when that bomb went off. And I was on a helicopter carrier about 4 miles off the coast. I was in the first helicopter that went in, picked up the Marines that were wounded. And, you know, an LHA has a 50 hospital bed situation, you know, where they can have that many people in a hospital. But in a situation like that, where you have 243 Marines that are killed and hundreds of them are wounded and stuff like that, we put cots and things in the hangar deck, and you adapt. And you do things to answer your question, sir, to try to frame it in a different way. You know, nobody expected what happened on September 11th to happen. And you look at what those people in New York went through, and they did some incredible things. And as human beings, we do incredible things to help out our fellow man when those situations happen.
So I'm actually going to build on the question this lady had, or the suggestion she had, which is when you do the sound test, you know, the live component is great if you can be there live. Many of us, I'm sure I can't be. I don't know what time or what day, but it's just going to be hard with kids and such. If you can put not only a report online, but if there's a video or some package that just helps the community better understand beyond just the numbers, but through visuals, through interviews of folks who were there, maybe some other neighbors. It's a suggestion throwing out and putting that video online for easy access and make sure that link is dispersed broadly in the community. I know I would appreciate that. Great.
You would collect data for 72 to 96 hours. And then, like as the doc said, you have equipment that records constantly. Yeah. You have equipment that collects data every 3 minutes, and you do it. And then you actually fly the approach at a specified time, and you see how that interacts with what's taking place.
What's the time frame you're looking at doing this, starting it and having the final results available?
The noise study will probably, if it takes 96 hours, it takes 4 days to collect the data. Then you got to give them, 5 or 6 days to analyze it. And we have reached out to a company and we've asked for a proposal. So I would feel confident in telling you that the noise data will be collected in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, so safe assumption is some point by April we should have the results?
I would think that that's a very safe statement.
Okay, thank you.
We talked a lot about the sound impacts of the proposal, but I'm also sort of wondering about the visual impacts. You talked about the general location of where the helipad would go, and I apologize, I've never been on your roof, so I don't know what the situation is up there. But I'm wondering, for the helipad, how much higher above the existing roof line the helipad would go. When it comes to sight lines, if you're standing on the sidewalk outside of Circa across the street, would you see the helipad itself? Would you see how much of a helicopter on the helipad would you see? And then also, because the elevator is such a critical component of the helipad, is the plan to branch off of an existing elevator in the hospital, and how much of that would you see?
I'll take the elevator, you take the helipad.
Not a problem.
The elevator piece is easy. The topmost floor, when you look up at the hospital right now, you see that kind of the aluminum colored, for lack of a better term, fencing material. That's where the mechanicals are, the air conditioning units, the heaters, the water purifiers, etc. So there is already a elevator that goes up there to allow maintenance folk to go up there. So there's really no need to build, in fact, we're not going to build another elevator chute, nor is there a need to kind of do much to the elevator itself. It's already big enough to take a gurney and whatnot. So the elevator piece has already been, that's not an issue. It's already fixed itself. Regarding the helipad,
the helipad, I would say the actual landing pad for the helicopter will be less than 6 to 8 feet. Probably most likely a lot lower, but what I don't want to do is give you a number and then have you come back and say, well, he said it's probably going to be 2 to 3 feet, but I'm going to tell you 6 to 8 feet is what the pad's going to be. You're going to have to mark it with aviation lights that will have reflectors on it so that the light is being able to be seen from the pilot's perspective, not from what you see on the ground. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a flash. It's going to be the outskirts of the pad will be lit in a light blue light. And then you'll see the helicopter lights on when it's in the process of shutting down for about a minute and stuff.
The lighting will not be projected downward toward the ground.
No.
Yeah. The lighting is just projected upward. That's it. So it's not going to affect civilians or anything to that effect.
Typically, they turn off. Typically, even airfields, smaller airfields, have radio-controlled lights. 3 clicks turns it on low intensity, 5 clicks turns it on medium intensity, and 7 clicks turns it on high intensity. So the pilots will turn it on as they're coming in, and they're on a timer, and they usually go off 5 to 15 minutes later. It all depends on how it's set.
Hello. So am I to understand that the roof is viable for putting a pad up there without further construction on the top of the hospital building?
That's what I've been told, ma'am.
Okay. My other question is, you're talking about noise surveys. I'm wondering if you're going to do some seismic surveys, because many of the buildings in the area were not built to any kind of seismic standard. They're not soundproof. A lot of them have, let's say, small bricks and layers and veneers and things. And the historic buildings are, God knows how their grout is. So I think there need to be some seismic and vibration studies also. That's my point of view. And my third thing is, it's too bad that these other hospitals in the city don't upgrade their services, plus that we don't have nurses and ambulance. I'm really concerned about that. Why is that? Why hasn't that been covered? Thank you.
Well, the seismic thing needs to be looked at, but let's remember that we're talking about the vibrations from a helicopter that. Say again? I don't know what she's talking about as far as she lived near Nam or something like that. But, I mean, you're not talking about a Bell 412. You're talking about an aircraft that weighs about 8,500 pounds. You're talking about a 135 that does not have a tail rotor, which is one of the biggest vibration forces. It has a Fenstrom. It's an encased ductile fan that's quieter and doesn't have the same vibrations. I read some email chains that talked about the helicopters and the vibrations of the buildings and the windows and all that. I mean, I've lived in military communities my whole life, and I've never had anything destroyed from a helicopter vibration.
Could I just say that I live like a block from the hospital at this point, and when the 80 bus goes by the corner, things on my desk shake. And when one of the choppers for a mall event or the executive travel goes by, my whole windows vibrate.
But I think that gets back to the type of helicopters. Those helicopters are,
I understand it, but that's why I'm saying
Sure.
there's a lot of vibration.
Sure.
There's a lot of seismic. You guys really should look at that, regardless of how small it is.
I'll respond to your question about the why the other hospitals aren't trauma centers. Since I'm the chief of trauma, I finally know what I'm talking about in this whole evening. To be a level 1 trauma center is a big deal, and that's why there's not that many of them around. In order to I don't know the exact trauma budget off the top of my head. It would be in the tens of millions of dollars per year expended, because you have to have an operating room available and staffed 24 hours a day. If that operating room is used for anything other than trauma, so for example, you show up with appendicitis, another team is called in immediately. There has to be a team available for trauma patients 24/7. So we have multiple teams with backup systems. All those employees have to be paid. We have a robust blood bank. I'll tell you right now, I'm just going to show off a little bit. George Washington has 5 state-of-the-art, truly I say to you, state-of-the-art blood rapid transfusers. Each of those transfusers costs about $30,000. Each of those transfusers can transfuse 1/4 of 1 gallon of blood per minute. Nobody at George Washington bleeds to death until we have finally said there's just nothing else we can do for you. And we have a blood bank capable of keeping up with that. Think of that. 1/4 of a gallon of blood transfused per minute. And we do it regularly. Well, that takes infrastructure. That takes a lot of training. That takes a lot of resources. So not every hospital has the means to do that, nor should they. I actually think from a national perspective, the economics professor maybe can echo this, that'd be a colossal waste of money to put everyone as a level 1 trauma center. You're better off regionalizing your resources. So that's why not every hospital has this capability, and frankly, that's why I'm proud to work at George Washington, and I would not want to work at another hospital because I'm a trauma surgeon. And then the last thing I mentioned is about the critical care transport nurse piece, and I agree with you. I wish my wife's a nurse. I wish there were more of them. There's such a dramatic nursing shortage that it's all the hospitals can do to keep them in the building. Never mind telling a nurse, hey, you know, it's about 105 degrees and humid. Why don't you hop in the back of that ambulance? And how about no? And that's the problem.
My name is Lois, and I work at the hospital. And he just bragged about himself a little bit or showed off, but I'm going to show off a little bit about him as well because I have the privilege of working with him every day. And this is a personal issue for me as well, just like Lieutenant Colonel Coughlin, who I just met this evening. My husband's also a retired Marine, who was able to walk today because he was aeromedicaled off of a warship after being injured during combat. So that's a very personal issue for us as well. Additionally, I also lived on military installations most of my adult life, and for some reason we kept getting stationed on air stations, specifically the Harrier jet, and they seem to test those engines all the time. So I hear you with the noise pollution. I've been in meetings like this myself. But more importantly, what really struck me was your question earlier, ma'am, when you said, are you telling me, are there people dying because not getting our resources? And Dr. Serrani takes that very personally, and he said to you, yes, and I can tell you that he knows their names, that he thinks about them quite often, and that he reflects on them both with his team and in his office. But more importantly, there are people surviving because of what we're doing. And my favorite day of the year that I considered an absolute privilege, and I would never let anything come in between me and this day, is I get to see him welcome back every year in November when we have a day of gratitude, the people that survived because they came to our hospital. People who were transferred in from outside facilities, your friends and neighbors who had accidents that they weren't expecting to have that day. Everybody we see on the trauma team every day, it's the worst day that they've ever had. No one wakes up in the morning thinking they're come to visit us. And we do really good work in saving lives. And we do that with the support of this community. There are people that are a part of this association that volunteer at our hospital, that support our women's board and their philanthropic mission. And so, we're here tonight. I know he's here tonight to talk to you because we really do see you as partners. You're the people that we take care of, and our patients, whether they be your neighbors or the people we transfer in, you have no idea, but you're passing them every day on the sidewalk when they come out after having their miracle that we were able to provide because of the resources that we have, and really the support of this community who has supported us through many endeavors, whether it be our journey to becoming a trauma center or to becoming a transplant center. And while it is a privilege to work with him every day, and I'm amazed by what he does consistently and the team that he leads, it's a really big privilege to be a part of this community as someone who serves you. I have a daughter who's going to be starting at school here on this campus in the fall, and so I do feel committed to you and what you do because you're the people whose hands we hold every day, who we go by and see, this community and the people that you invite into it, that you allow us to take care of. So, there are people who don't make it to GW who have terrible outcomes, but more importantly, there are people who are surviving and going home to their family and their children who are walking again, like my husband is. And, that is an absolute gift that is really hard to put a number on. And I understand your concerns because, again, I've lived with those as well, but you're doing a service to your community by being an active part here and supporting the hospital. So we thank you for that.
I'm going to try and let the people who haven't talked before talk first before we go around.
I guess my question is for Colonel Conklin. Thank you. How are we going to conduct a noise test with no helipad there? And will the community be made aware of the dates that the helicopter is actually going to be flying into the...
I think the community should be made aware. I don't speak for the hospital. I mean, I'm a consultant that they've brought in because of my expertise. But again, the helicopter, as I stated earlier, will shoot the approach that is going to be approved by the FAA. It will sit and hover over the building at 50 feet, 25 feet, and then you'll collect the data. I mean, that's how you do the noise study. It's going to be worse because for a helicopter to come into a hover it takes more power. Power creates noise. It creates noise from the engine. It creates power as the rotor blades are grabbing a bigger bite of the air. So that'll be the worst case scenario.
I just think that it would be helpful if the people in my building knew what time that was going to happen, so we could actually get a real time, a real ideal picture of.
Again, I think the hospital is trying to reach out to the community, establish, and again, there's things that happen in aviation, as far as a fly neighborly policy, as far as I mean, when I attended that meeting in Alexandria in 1998, we as a helicopter operator in the Marine Corps would fly at the maximum altitude permissible. We would do what we were allowed to do to be a friendly neighbor, and those are the types of things that you do.
I believe that all the residents of Foggy Bottom West End who are here appreciate the work of George Washington University Hospital, but that is not why we are here. We are not here to say how wonderful you are or how bad you are. We are here to talk about the issue of a helipad. Yep. And it's become pretty clear to me as a resident here that noise is an issue, that seismic is an issue. I'm trying to wrap my head around, where this helipad will be. And based on what you said about the roof, isn't that almost directly over the metro exit?
It's on that side of the building, yes.
Yeah, isn't it? It would be almost, so the noise of the helicopter coming down would be in that area, general area, by the metro exit.
That's exactly right. By the courtyard behind the metro where the medical school, Ross Hall is, that little concrete pavilion area?
Yeah.
Right there.
So it would be there?
Yes.
Where the market is on Wednesday?
Yes, exactly.
Right below that area?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
One of the
but
things...
I also think that this is an opportunity for the residents to express their opinion and not hear advocacy. Okay? It's pretty obvious that you're advocating for this. We wouldn't be here if you weren't. So, whether someone was, a Marine One helicopter or not is not the issue. I respect your experience, but advocating for something, I think that the point of this meeting is to get input, not necessarily to advocate or to argue, right?
Well, not to argue, but advocacy certainly. We're hearing advocacy from all sides.
I think that, one of the misnomers, okay, if you've got something out there producing 92 decibels like an ambulance, and you've got a helicopter producing 85 decibels, it's not cumulative, it's not additive. It doesn't all of a sudden, you don't have a greater level of noise because you've got those two things going on.
Okay, I'm going to do the last question because we're almost out of time. The last question came in from online, and it was a question about whether the helipad would be able to support something like a park police helicopter.
No.
So there's no possibility of being able to...
Based on the information that I've seen, the S-76, 11,700 pounds, is the maximum helicopter. It's a design helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with what the Park Police done. Do you know what helicopter the Park Police is flying?
So I will chime in. They have 2 Bell 412s and 1 Bell Long Ranger. And I only ask because I participated in their Citizens Academy, so I watched.
The Long Ranger could land on the heli. I mean, the weight of that is less. I don't know what the weight of the 412 is.
It's over 15,000.
So it's not. It would be too heavy to land. The helipad could not support it.
So one of them could, but the others couldn't.
The Long Ranger could. And I will tell you that the Long Ranger is a older, not as quiet helicopter as the 145 or the 135.
Although that's already flying all over the DC airspace because it's police. So they'll go wherever they feel like going. And do.
Thank you for having this discussion, but I really agreeing with the gentleman that we are here after a long work day and here to address certain issue that concern us. So we appreciate if we don't sensationalize this situation and tell us some facts that is helping us to understand what's going on with some drawing. We need an environmental study, impact study.
You're going to get one.
Environmental impact study with the ambulances that constantly coming and going, always on, and with everything else that you're proposing together, so we see what is going on. We really appreciate that.
From an environmental point of view, you're not talking about, fuel or anything that's going to hazardous materials that are going to come out of the helicopter.
I think, guys, as we, get ready to close, and I want to thank you sincerely for putting this together. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out. I know most of you guys have been working a whole day, and who wants to go to GW and Funger Hall at 8 o'clock at night? I mean, not me. Do me a favor, if I may say, as you said, please just keep an open mind, and then, you know what? Let's just prove me wrong. Like, I'm not saying we're going to do this. What I'm saying is we're going to do a sound study, and if you can just look at that data with an open mind and take the data as, I'm not jury-rigging anything. I'm just, frankly, a doctor. I don't even know how to jury-rig sound studies. Just look at it, and if it looks horrifically bad, then raise your voice in protest, as you should, as a member of the community. And if it looks acceptable, then do that. I mean, just vote your conscience. But I really want to thank you, and hold me honest, and I hope to God I have not been here to try to dupe you or sell you an igloo or whatever. I really just believe, from my perspective, this is the right thing to do.
The Foggy Bottom Association board needs to decide what it's going to do too, and your input tonight has a lot to do with that. But what I would like to do is to have a show of hands of people who support the helicopter, people who oppose it, and people who are neutral, or people who don't know. Okay, all right then. Okay. You will get a second opportunity to talk about this and to hear more information. I'm not sure what the timing is going to be vis-a-vis the sound study, but this is going to come before the ANC for a vote. So there will be another time to talk about it that I know of, and I'm sure there are going to be other opportunities. I really appreciate everybody's coming and participating, and thank you to whoever may be online watching us. If you have questions, if you want, you can shoot them to me, and I will make sure Dr. Serrani or Lieutenant Colonel Coughlin get them. And that's president@foggybottomassociation.org. So please, if you want to continue participating, if you go to bed tonight and tomorrow you think of something else, please let us know. Thank you.